Hello, listeners, TEFL. You may have noticed that this week's episode is a little shorter than usual. This is because of an unfortunate audio fire that we experienced. All three TEFLologists are safe and sound, don't worry about that, but the TEFL news segment was badly damaged in the fire and we were unable to include it in this episode. So we hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast and we'll be back with a full episode soon.
Is a dogma lesson just not bothering to plan? That's a question for TEFLologists. When I read this book, is it better to skim or scan? That's a question for TEFLologists. Can you be a good teacher if you have a CELTA? Or should you invest in an MA or a Delta? From politics to methodology, we'll discuss them all on TEFLology.
Hello, I'm Matthew.
I'm Rob.
And I'm Matt.
And welcome back to TEFLology, a podcast about teaching English as a foreign language and related matters, presented by three self-certified TEFLologists.
TEFL Cultures.
So this episode's TEFL culture is something called the focal skills, or the focal skills approach. Have either of you heard of this?
No.
I haven't actually, no.
Is it also known as the Specsavers approach?
No.
Okay.
To be honest, I'm not sure how common it is or how popular it is. It is used, and it has been around for a little while.
Right.
It's used in second language programs in a few universities, mostly in the States. University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, the English language program at the United Nations, and a few other universities.
Okay.
All in the States, as far as I can tell. So it was started, as far as I know, in 1988 by Dr. Ashley Hastings.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it maybe it seems like as a starting point, he started with Krashen's work.
Right.
But basically, it's called focal skills because it's in terms of actual teaching technique. I probably won't go into that too much because I think it's basically kind of CLT, skills focused, content based, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But there are a few kind of unique activities which I'll talk about. But basically, what happens is what he identified was a kind of not exactly a natural order, but considering that students, language learners, should improve their skills in a specific order.
Mm.
So he starts with listening.
Right.
And then the idea is you get a good foundation in your listening, and then you move on to reading.
Right.
And then you move on to writing.
Mm. And speaking comes.
Well, speaking is kind of is happening all the time as well.
Right. Okay. So speaking is a sort of a foundation thing, and the other three come along in sequence.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then after the writing, you work on kind of advanced stuff, maybe academic English, basically.
Right. Right.
But how it works is if you're a student in a focal skills program, you would start by being assessed, firstly on your listening, and if your listening doesn't reach a certain threshold according to the assessment, you take a listening course.
Right.
You take a week of listening lessons, basically. I think I don't know how often. I think at the end of that week, you would have another listening assessment. If you've reached if you reach the threshold, then you would move on to a reading course. But if you haven't reached the threshold, then you do another week of listening.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as they describe it, it's possible a student might spend 10 weeks just doing listening, never reaching the necessary threshold to be able to move on to a reading course.
What's the threshold based on?
That I couldn't find out, to be honest.
Right. Okay.
I had a look at a lot of the literature, various articles written about it, and also there's a kind of focal skills, its own website. But they weren't giving away the specific assessment.
Right.
So actually, I say you do only, for example, only listening, but actually you do you do basically 75% listening, and then 25% you can choose a module of your own desire.
Right. So it's
which
not
could be something different.
It's not entirely dictated by the teachers and by the course. The student has a little bit of autonomy there.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. And so you kind of enter this system where you start with your listening, and then you reach a certain level, then you move on to reading, and then you reach a certain level, then you move on to writing, etc. But at the same time, they're constantly kind of checking your different skills. So if your listening dips, if they assess your listening and it's dipped below the threshold, which is possible, then you have to go back and do some more listening practice.
Right.
So in any given week, the reason it's called the focal skills approach is that in any given week, you are focusing on your weakest skill.
Right.
I see.
Whatever it happens to be.
How does this work with groups? Because with groups you tend to want to keep them all paced at the same level, right? And you want to keep them together. How does this method work with groups?
Well, I mean, it doesn't basically. So your classmates week to week will likely change.
Right.
Yeah.
I can see some downsides to that.
Some downsides, but perhaps some positives too.
Yeah.
You're interacting with a lot of different peers, I guess.
Yeah. But on the downside, you don't get to know people that well, I guess. You don't know
That's true. Yeah.
Do you think language learning really works like that in kind of segmented skills in that way?
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, they in a lot of the literature they talk about the importance of integrated skills, and they talk a lot about how one each skills kind of complements or feeds into another.
Right.
But at the same time, they are separating them. It seems quite a bit.
Yeah. You said that this was based on an idea of a kind of a natural order of acquisition, like listening and then reading and then writing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, do you think that is a natural way that people learn? Because as we were saying when we did your segment on accelerated language learning, a lot of the very, very successful polyglots, they tend to focus a lot on it seems to me they tend to focus a lot on their reading skills particularly, and their ability to decode language that way. And that's my experience from learning as well. I'm much better at learning reading and writing than I am at learning speaking and listening because it's slower.
You're right, of course.
I'm sure there's been studies that say extensive reading has effects on oral skills as well. Perhaps.
Well, I mean, so they being kind of being influenced by Krashen, they part of the focal skills course in the reading element would be extensive reading, or actually what they call personal reading.
Right. Okay.
So and they do there is an emphasis on input, comprehensible input. So one of the most popular activities in a focal skills approach is called the focal skills movie technique.
Right.
And this is basically the students watch a movie, and the teacher just kind of narrates and paraphrases what's happening to provide the right level of input for the students to be able to follow the story or to know what's going on.
Right.
A movie with the sound on?
I think so, yeah.
So does the teacher pause to do the paraphrasing or just speak at the top of it in a big voice?
No, they can pause it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think the idea is the teacher gets to know the movie very well, the character names and what's going to happen and when's a good place to pause. And basically it's kind of like a scaffolded viewing of the movie.
Right.
I'd find that really irritating if I was a student. And I'm sure you've been there where a friend's seen a movie but you haven't. They're like, oh, here comes the good bit.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But at the same time, when I'm watching films with my girlfriend, like Japanese films, I have to pause the movie quite often and say, yeah, so what just happened? What's going on? And then I'll
Right.
get a quick gloss and then carry on,
Mm-mm. Yeah, I don't know. I think it could be interesting. As a teacher, do you think you'd enjoy conducting that kind of lesson?
I don't know. I'd find it. Yeah, maybe I'd find it instantly gratifying. I guess the fact that you can explain something and you can it's kind of a teach test approach in a way. Like, you can see what the students didn't pick up on. You explain something, and then you can play it again straight away, and they can kind of see it straight away.
Yeah, that's true.
I can imagine it'd be slightly annoying for some of the quicker students in the class, because like you'd pause it to explain to the students who didn't seem to understand, and then there'd be a group of students who'd be sitting there and thinking, well, I did understand that. What are you stopping the film for?
Right. Yeah, I think the tricky thing I was thinking about, if I, because I like movies, it would be a kind of nice thing to bring into the classroom. But then I realized, I think the biggest mistake you would make would be to choose a movie that you really like.
Right.
Because you probably hate it by the end of the lesson.
Right. Yeah.
I've had that experience with songs where I've tried to, a song that I think is very nice, and after hearing it 5 times in a lesson, I don't want to hear it anymore.
Yeah.
Another activity that they do in the vocal skills approach is called the talk show. So in this, what happens is 2 teachers basically interact with each other in front of the class, and carrying out some kind of task, and basically just providing a model for the students to watch and take in.
Right.
I guess so. One thing that they put quite a bit of emphasis on is using realia or authentic materials. And so there's no course books, or rarely use of any course books.
Right. I see.
There's also interactive reading. So that's a kind of group reading activity. So basically, they explore an authentic text together, guided by the teacher.
Right.
There's something called they do free writing. So I guess kind of developing their writing fluency. But this then leads to focused rewrite. So the teacher takes the students' written output and then chooses portions of it to rewrite in clearer, basically, I think, better English, basically.
Right.
Do you think that would be would you appreciate somebody doing that to your learner written Japanese?
I think to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, it depends how much it was decided that needed to be corrected. I can imagine it being a little bit demotivating, but yeah, to a certain extent, I think it'd be useful.
I'm not sure about the whole idea of skills in isolation. I think like the language learning experience is, you as a learner, I'd kind of want a bit of everything, like not all at once, but certainly very close together. I'm not really sure how this would work in a number of different contexts. And also, it kind of seems like by keeping them locked into a course, they're kind of making money as well. That might be the case, perhaps?
It may be, yeah. I mean, most of the examples I found of it being used seems to be in universities.
Okay.
I'm sure there are kind of more commercial applications of it as well.
Yeah.
So this is something I wasn't really aware of at all. I just kind of found it in my research. Thought it was an interesting approach to kind of syllabus design for what mostly seems like a lot of kind of known CLT techniques, plus a few slightly odd ones.
Right.
Yeah. So that's this week's TEFL culture.
TEFL Pioneers.
Today's TEFL pioneer is Alice Vanderbilt Morris. Have you heard that name before?
It's a great name, but no, I've never heard of him.
No.
Well, so it's our second female TEFL pioneer, I think.
Second?
I think second, after Rebecca Oxford.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So Alice Vanderbilt Morris was a co-founder of the International Auxiliary Language Association, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. she was a member of the Vanderbilt family, which is a very wealthy and prominent American family, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
She lived from 1874 to 1950.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to read the Wikipedia summary of her early life because it's hilarious.
Okay.
So, according to Wikipedia, Alice was known to her family as Angela because of the sweetness of her disposition and the beauty of her face, well demonstrated by her attached portrait. And if you want to see that, go to Wikipedia and have a look at the picture they've got.
Mm-hmm.
She was no true angel, however, and climbed a tree against her father's specific interdiction and fell out, fracturing her thoracic spine. Her father, a hard man, refused to call the doctor to punish her disobedience. She grew up deformed in Woodley, a mansion on the Hudson now occupied as the clubhouse of the Sleepy Hollow Country Club.
Wow.
Wait, that's not it. It continues. She was courted for some time by Dave. That's David Hennon Morris, who was her husband, but Wikipedia's gone for the more informal Dave.
Yeah.
So she was courted for some time by Dave, who saw her face around the funnel of the steamer to France and knew at once that he must marry her. When he pursued her more closely, he saw that she had a deforming scoliosis, which did not change his ardor one bit. When he presented himself to ask for her hand in marriage, her father, brackets, the hard man, told him he would never amount to anything good and asked him to leave and have no further contact with the family. When he was allowed to say goodbye to her in the hall, he asked her to elope with him. She climbed out the window that night for an extraordinary life.
Nice.
I don't think you should ever, as a rule of thumb, never go for a girl who's standing near a funnel. I think that's...
Well, I don't know. It turns out it's quite a good choice. She was a very interesting person.
Right, yeah.
So she went on to study at Harvard University.
Mm-hmm.
And despite her illness, which was well documented in that description, she undertook extremely extensive linguistic research into the field of international auxiliary languages, particularly trying to find a neutral international auxiliary language. So quickly, are you familiar with what that is?
No.
So think something like Esperanto.
Yes.
So a language that can be used as a means of communication for speakers all around the world. Not quite like English is, but in a similar way. So at this time, there was a search to try and find an auxiliary language that was a bit more artificial or a bit more neutral, as I just said.
Okay.
So in 1924, she co-founded the International Auxiliary Language Association with her husband, which was intended to promote widespread study, discussion, and publicity of all questions involved in the establishment of an auxiliary language, together with research and experiments that it may hasten such establishment in an intelligent manner and on stable foundations. That was the goal of the group. She was fluent in Esperanto, and she wanted to promote that language as part of the goals of the organization, but instead decided that it was a bit too artificial. Esperanto was too artificial, too difficult for people to learn.
Yeah.
And so I think this was her biggest contribution to, not TEFL exactly, but to language education. She created, or she worked to create a new auxiliary language based on the features of natural languages, so already existing languages. And the foundation together created a language called Interlingua.
Okay.
What do you think that is based on the name?
Something among various other languages.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a new language based on features of natural languages, mostly Romance languages, but also with words that were common around many different languages, or had similar sounding words. So, for example, in English you have name, and in Japanese, even though it's a different language, they say namae, which is a similar thing, right? So the grammar in Interlingua is very simple, with very few irregular forms. The vocabulary chosen is common to the widest possible range of languages. So there's lots of cognates.
Right. Isn't Esperanto similar to that?
It is, but Esperanto is more schematic, apparently.
Okay.
So Esperanto is a bit more artificial, and it's not as widely understandable
Okay.
as Interlingua,
Right.
apparently. Yeah.
By speakers of Romance languages, or
Yeah, although they claim by speakers of more than just Romance languages.
oh, really? Okay.
So it's still used as a common auxiliary language today, at least as common as Esperanto, and it's claimed to be comprehensible. So, as I said, they say that it can be understood more easily by people around the world, but it's claimed to be almost completely comprehensible to anyone who speaks a Romance language.
Right.
So, even if you have no knowledge of Interlingua, if you listen to someone speaking it, you should be able to understand it if you speak a Romance language.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. What do you think of that as an idea?
It sounds very similar to the lingua franca core, does it not?
Kind of, but the lingua franca core is promoting features of an existent language, whereas this is creating its own language.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So there was some research that the foundation did with Swedish students, which showed that after learning Interlingua, they could easily translate elementary texts from Italian, Portuguese, and Spanish into their own language. So not only, if you learn Interlingua, not only can you understand Interlingua, but it also makes it easier for you to understand all of the other Romance languages that Interlingua was based on.
Right.
Apparently.
Okay.
And in a 1974 study, an Interlingua class translated a Spanish text that students who had taken 150 hours of Spanish found too difficult to understand.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
So what do you think of Interlingua?
Yeah, I mean, this idea of artificial languages, made up languages, is interesting. Like, obviously they never get too popular. They're often kind of created on these lofty ideals, which don't really connect to the real world.
Yes.
But I don't know. Like, I remember one thing I remember, very interesting thing I heard about made up languages is obviously for movies and books. Sometimes people make up languages,
like Klingon.
like Klingon, Tolkien obviously made up a few.
Yeah.
And apparently he, from an interview I read with some, apparently Tolkien was very good at making up languages.
Yeah, he was quite the linguist.
But apparently the key is what you do is you make up a language, and then you use that as the proto-language. You don't start with a language. You make a language, and then you kind of see what language would have descended from that made-up language.
Right.
Several generations. And then you have a more authentic made-up language. So I've always wondered about things like Esperanto and maybe Interlingua, if how the people who do decide to use it or to learn it, how much they adapt it or let it evolve in a kind of natural way.
I wonder if it's if it can be done in one generation. So with pidgins, contact languages, they they remain pidgins for like one generation, but as soon as the generation is born speaking that, it becomes a Creole. It becomes more complex and has a lot more linguistic features. I wonder if the same is true of this kind of artificial language, or if the same could be true.
Because you mentioned that the idea was make it with very few irregularities. But it's irregularities that often kind of mark languages as highly evolved, or
yes.
So I wonder. And it seems maybe those irregularities. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure you could write beautiful poetry in Interlingua. But if it hasn't evolved from its kind of original creation, I wonder what they see as the future of it.
Yeah, well, I guess the irregular forms show that it's been taken out of the box and played with. It's got scuff marks on it. It's not
exactly.
It's not in showcase condition.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's just going back to the idea of language learning. You said that in quite a short time they were able to translate texts
Yes, yeah.
Is there any evidence about like speaking skills or actual productive rather than just receptive skills?
Not in specific studies that I found. They may be out there, but I didn't find them. But they do claim, the Interlingua Foundation did claim, I don't think the foundation exists anymore, but they did claim that it can be used to learn other related languages very quickly and very easily. And they also claim that Interlingua itself can be learned a lot more easily than other Romance languages because of the number of cognates and because of the simplicity of the grammar.
Right.
Yeah, but you know, I haven't seen any direct research supporting that, so it might just all be hogwash.
So do you think learning this particular language form can kind of boost other target languages, perhaps?
Well, that's what they claim, but only perhaps for Romance languages or languages very closely related to Interlingua. So that was the study that I mentioned before. So possibly, but I don't know 100%.
Right.
Yeah. So Alice Vanderbilt Morris died in 1950, just 6 months before the first Interlingua to English dictionary was published.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But a lot of other materials were produced before that, but this was like the cornerstone material, and she died just before it came out. But for her contributions to linguistics, she was awarded an honorary doctorate in literary science from Syracuse University.
Nice.
And she's been recognized as a pioneering female linguist.
By us.
So
now made official by us.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually you said she grew up in Woodley in Sleepy Hollow. Is that right?
Yes, she grew up deformed in Woodley. Get it correct.
Right, deformed. Yeah, I actually grew up very close to Sleepy Hollow, and I visited Woodley, the country club there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
There you go. Wow.
Her ghost still haunts.
On a horse.
No, you're thinking of somebody else. She can't ride a horse.
Headless on a horse.
Horribly deformed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a tree involved there as well, wasn't there, in that film?
The film added a lot of elements.
But it's interesting how she fell from a tree, and then the film, like, he goes into a tree.
Yeah.
Interesting, that, isn't it? Yeah.
I smell sequel.
Right. Yeah.
The Legend of Alice Vanderbilt, whatever.
Interlingua, yeah.
Yeah. Her tree wasn't full of severed heads, though, so
Severed languages, surely.
yes. Yeah.
The remains of all the languages they cut up to make Interlingua.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a smash hit. We should get on it. Yeah. But anyway, that's today's TEFL pioneer, Alice Vanderbilt Morris.
Okay, so thank you very much for listening today.
If you'd like to get in contact with us, please send an email to teflology@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter @teflology. Also, if you could rate and review this podcast, that really does help the show, and please tell your friends and that kind of thing. So, it's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from me.
Goodbye.